Hello and welcome to the Dream Architect Life with Brian Sweet and Brittany Anderson from Sweet Financial Partners. Brittany, how are you?
So completely wonderful today.
Brian, I hope you're doing the same.
I am awesome. Thanks, Eric.
All right, fantastic. Well, I'm excited because I know that we're continuing the discussion. You guys are going to continue discussing navigating uncertainty and adversity, which right now I think that's incredibly important, and people, are trying to figure this out for themselves.
Yeah, Eric, I think we could have probably shot about 42 episodes on this topic.
Yeah.
Because there is so much uncertainty and there is so much search for truth, I think, in what people are looking for today and how they're feeling and where their heads are going and all of those different things. So last episode, we dove into kind of how you go about doing that and why a lot of what we talk about with mindset, with focusing on controllables, with putting your intention in intentional space, there's a tongue twister for you, why that's so important and why it's not just the high level woo-woo stuff, why it actually benefits and how it benefits your life and why people should really tune into this topic, especially right now. So that's what we're going to be digging into here in just a minute.
All right, fantastic. I'm ready to start. I could use a little bit of this today.
Perfect.
Woo, well,
you're with the right people.
Yeah, nice.
Where we are, it's when we're shooting this, it's a rainy, gloomy, thunderstruck day. So we're going to bring some sunshine into the land right now. So to get us kicked off here, when we're talking about building a dream retirement, there's this giant F word that comes into play. And it's not the one that people, you don't go that direction. Let's stay out of the rabbit hole. But it's more so, it's fear. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times fear can be the one thing that hinders us from doing things that are productive for our future. So as we're talking about navigating a dream retirement, a dream-filled life, one that is filled with all the things that are important to you, what we don't want to do is have fear get in the way. Mm-hmm. And when you think about that, what's going on in the world today, and let's just honor it with where it's at, what's going on in the world today can absolutely elicit fear and it can cause paralysis in people moving forward in their lives. So I know we've talked about this before, but we need to harp on this a little bit. If you find yourself tuning into mainstream media, if you find yourself succumbing to, social feeds. I just had a conversation with somebody earlier this morning talking about how news is fed on social media feeds and what's happening. And I want to push on this because when you talk about uncertainty and fear, it all wraps into this. So when you are, call it on Facebook, you're even on Google and you're searching for something, some sort of truth, whatever that means to you, those elements are actually putting in front of you exactly what you're telling it to. So what's happening here? Not only is your brain, because we've talked about the reticular activating system and how that searches for evidence of what you believe and what you're looking for at the time, but all of a sudden the technology that's at our fingertips is also feeding our minds with things that we're telling it to be true. So what's happening is people are being fed with the same garbage. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for evidence that the world is bad and things are horrible and everything's going to hell in a handbasket, whatever that term is, you're going to find evidence of that to be true based on what you're searching for. So our whole goal with the Dream Architect Life podcast is to put positivity into the world and to show examples of good and to help people put their minds and focus in the right spot. So that was it was really an interesting conversation because, if you think about that, everything that we're doing is trying to show evidence of what we're looking for. So let's start trying to unearth and uncover the positives and the stories of good that are out there. There's a lot of them.
Yeah. And given, today's environment, all of this stuff is actually magnified now. Mm-hmm. So it's even worse than normal. So if you're really starting to get uptight and nervous, it's just the levels of stuff that you're getting hit with is just enhanced.
Yeah. And I think that one thing that was very surprising to me over the last couple of years is we've all known that the big media players, right, the big channels, which we won't say their letters, but the ones that are nationwide, the main news feeds, we know that they have their own agendas. We know what their purpose is to sell advertising. But a lot of us, and me included, we thought we were safer with local news, right? If we're tuning into our local news, we're going to get a different story or we're going to get a different viewpoint. And just recently in the last year or two, there's been a couple examples of I would say scripted fear, really, Brittany, because somebody put together a video of a local news channel beginning a story and then had clips of other local news channels from around the nation saying the exact same thing. They were fed this by corporate headquarters so that all of these local news stations were saying the same report. And I was dumbstruck. At the end of the video, there's 20 different local channels on the same screen saying the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just lose that ability to say, hey, this is going to be different this time. How do you avoid that kind of stuff? Because it seems to be permeating in every aspect of our lives.
Yeah. I think, Eric, unfortunately, I don't know that there's an answer directly for, especially when it comes to the news, comes to what's being reported, what's being put in front of us. So whether it's local, whether it's nationwide, whether it's global, you just don't know. And I think if anybody had the answers, there would just be a really different shift happening right now. But I think one thing people can put into practice when you're looking at all that's going on in the world, because again, we're looking at uncertainties, you're looking at all that's going on in the world, there's very, very little that we can control and have direct control over, right? Like I can physically go and manipulate this particular situation. So something that we've seen, the people who have really had strong mindsets through everything that's gone on, that have been just strong-minded in general and able to really kind of navigate all that's going on, are the people that are pursuing something that's greater than themselves. So when you have like a big goal, a big ambition, a big dream, you can call it whatever you want to call it, all of a sudden the noise that is going on in the world, it kind of quiets down a little bit because your attention and energy is all centered and focused around something that you are trying to achieve versus trying to understand and figure out all that's being put out there right now, which is enough to drive a very positive, sane person absolutely bonkers. So I think that's one thing that people can put into practice immediately. And it doesn't have to be some big grandiose thing. There's people out there that are trying to cure world hunger, and they're trying to create great housing for people all over the world. You don't have to go that big. You can start with something as simple as, maybe it's being an example to your children or your grandchildren, or being an example to your team if you're a business owner, or, just finding those little things to really keep you motivated in the positive direction. I know, Brian, we've talked about this many times, and, the people that are creating so much success and impact in the world, they've got something they're working towards and working on.
Yeah, I think just to take that one step further, Brittany, your comment about, doing things that you can control. Well, one thing you can control is just creating a little bit different habit. And so if you find yourself, getting fearful while watching the news, well, maybe do one of these two things. Find a podcast that you like that's uplifting, maybe this one, or find a book that you can read that has some positive message. And when you find yourself wanting to watch the news, listen to the podcast or read the book. And if you do that long enough, pretty soon you won't even want to watch the news. And I think it's all about intentionality, which is, a word that Brittany likes to use a lot, but I think in this case, it really applies.
Mm-hmm. Hey, it's Brittany here for a little tiny interruption. Brian and I have some really exciting news, and that is that our newest book, Dream Architecture, is officially launched. It is live. We have been working for a really long time to bring you quality content. This is all centered around really similar topics to what we talk about on the podcast here, but we're going even deeper. We're looking at where money and mindset meet so that you can focus on a life filled with possibility, a life filled with abundance, and one that creates true fulfillment for your future. So be sure to grab a copy. You can download it if you've got a reader, if you've got a Kindle. You can get your physical copy. Go to Amazon.com and look up Dream Architecture by yours truly, Brittany Anderson, and the wonderful Mr. Brian Sweet. We look forward to hearing your commentary and your feedback, and really hope this can help you continue your focus on possibility. Now we'll get right back into the episode.
Brian, that sounds fantastic, and I know that that's something that you have practiced, right? You have to be. I think the word you guys have used many times is intentionality. You have to be intentional about these types of things. Is there something that you do besides finding a book or finding a podcast that can help snap you out of? Maybe you're constantly looking at news. Well, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm assuming you're constantly looking at reports of some kind because you're helping your clients find success. So for the most part, you have to be in tune with what's going on in the markets, what's going on in the world, on the world stage. How do you snap yourself out of that when it kind of can become a little daunting?
Well, I'll jump in on this one, Brian, and then I'll have you share too. For me, there is something about just getting outside and taking a breather for a minute. So I think that's something that every single human being can do. Like, you can physically get up and go walk outside, whether it's take a quick walk around the block, walk around the building you're in, walk around whatever, but just being able to separate yourself from whatever it is that you're consumed with and let nature kind of do its magic. There's something to be said about that. But I also think too, it's really, really important. And I think, Brian, this is probably where you would go with this, is having positive people in your life that you can lean on in those moments. So if you find yourself feeling consumed, I mean, there's some of the most positive people that I have ever met in my life are being negatively impacted mentally by what's going on. But the difference is they're not staying stuck there. And they're leaning on the people in their lives to say, hey, this is where my head is at right now. Talk me off the ledge, or let's talk about something that isn't this, so that I can kind of shift my mindset and get back into the game per se. So I think those are two things I know that work for me. And Brian, I know we've talked about this at length before.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Having a person that in general is really positive, or the vibe you get from them is very positive. And if you find yourself in that little funk or where fear's kind of taken over, reach out to that person. Fortunately, I have one right in the office sitting right next to me. And so I get to utilize that whenever. And even as you alluded to, Brittany, even the most positive people are going to go through periods. So don't be hard on yourself if all of a sudden you feel overwhelmed and whatnot. That's just part of life. But the key is snapping out of it. And just be there for a second or two. And whatever the trigger point is, or some word you could say, or some phrase you could read, or some person you could reach out to, I think you just got to try different things and see what works for you, but try something. Because if you don't do anything, you're going to get stuck there, and then the outcome's not going to be what you want.
Well, it's funny because when you mentioned that, it actually came to mind that I think a lot of people do this naturally in certain areas of their life, but they don't cross it over to other areas. So let me give you an example. We were speaking before we hit the record button today. We recently moved. First of all, we have way too much stuff. I don't know how that happened, but we have so much stuff, and we're trying to unbury ourselves. But it is something where I'm constantly thinking about what's the next thing I need to do. And when I find myself just overwhelmed, and I've been working for 5 or 6 hours on the house or on different things, I'll take a break and do something that I find complete joy in, that I can focus on, that takes my brain away from all these other things. So for me, I love to build fountains, and I'm going to build a water feature in the front of this house. And so I just work on a little bit of that for maybe half an hour to 45 minutes just to give myself that break, but then get back to the things I know that I need to get done. Now, the fountain is a fun thing to do. It's a hobby that I enjoy. It can take my mind off of things. So I can't spend a ton of time on that because I have other work to do, but boy, it gives me that break that you guys are talking about. And I think that if I can incorporate that into my daily life when it comes to seeing what's on the news or going through things for my clients, I need to be able to take that break and get my mind shifted to something else. So I think that that's fantastic.
First of all, are you out for hire? Because that sounds really cool.
I love it.
No, and I think that's such a brilliant example to do something that fills your cup. And I think, we've been in a society or a culture that it's hustle, 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 and, bust your butt and work until you break and all of those things. Mm-hmm. And I just think with how the world is evolving, it's not sustainable. And, that's where I think people can actually create this massive positive shift by doing the things they love. And I think too, the other word to kind of go along with intentionality, I think, is awareness. And there's one thing that I do. This is kind of a self-check. And I know this may, again, we go back to the term woo-woo. It may feel a little woo-woo for some, but this is a self-check that I do where if I am in a negative state of mind, or I'm grumpy, or I'm just kind of feeling down, I literally ask myself, is what I'm believing, is it actually true? Because there's a difference there. Like if you're thinking about the spiral and the downward spiral, if I'm looking at it going, I mean, we have house projects going on too. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do at work and I have so much on the house, and how am I ever going to do this? And oh my gosh, now I'm going to be traveling and there's all these things going through my head. I stop and I say, okay, well, what's really true? What's really priority? I'm telling myself everything has to be done yesterday, but that's not really the case. So it's just kind of slowing down and being aware of your thoughts so that you can reel it back in and just put yourself in check, because there's not always going to be somebody there to help you. There's not always going to be the moments where you can do something super fun. So I think that awareness, being able to reel it in, is really important too.
Yeah. Well, you'd started to talk about an analogy before we hit the record button, about how this kind of parallels planning for vacation. Can you expand on that for me?
Yeah. So if you think about your life, and it doesn't matter if you're in retirement or you're still working or you're running a company or whatever, oftentimes if we have a really fun vacation planned, maybe you're going with friends, maybe it's somewhere you've never been, it's chock full of experiences, whatever that looks like for you, it gives you something to really look forward to. So there's a term for this and I can't remember what it is, but it's something like, how hard people will work leading up to vacation, knowing that they're going to be away for a week or 2 weeks or however long that's going to be. There's really no difference between that and planning for a dream-filled life. Because whether it's a vacation or it's some new initiative or a business venture or quality time with your family, like put in whatever you want to put in there. When you have dreams to fulfill and you have goals that you want to attain and big ambitions that you want to reach, you have something to get excited about and to wake up for every single day. Even if there's some stress along the way, it makes that stress a little bit more bearable, and it makes those grind moments not so painful. So I think that's something that I think you can liken it. Everybody knows that feeling of anticipation on a vacation. So if you think about your life in that capacity, it brings this whole conversation kind of full circle.
Yeah. I know it sounds a little woo woo, but I think you've
Here we
talked
go
about
again.
this. Yeah, right. I think you've talked about this before. We had some friends of ours that they went to Italy for 3 weeks, and we were just having a conversation yesterday about it took them 3 months before they left for the planning, but it was so much fun to do because they were visualizing, right?
Yeah.
So each of these steps they were visualizing, and I know that you've spoken about that before when it comes to those big dreams, those big goals that you have for retirement and beyond. That visualization is so important because you are working hard, right? And taking that moment to say, when I have A, B, or C in place, this is what I'm going to be able to do. And to visualize that, I think that can recharge your batteries in a big way.
Amen. And I know, Brian, you're such a visual person, and that's something that he and I talk about all the time. In order for like Brian to fully get on board and get excited about something, there has to be some sort of visual element to it. And I think that that's something that we've seen. Our advisors talk about this all the time, that when they can actually like paint the picture, be it in, it could be a single slide, it could be a series of, whatever the presentation looks like. When people can actually see and tangibly envision what it is that they're working towards or what they've stated is important, it creates this whole new level of excitement and engagement. So I think that's something that is so dead on. The visualization, I don't think it's woo-woo at all.
I would agree. And I would take that one step further, in that when you walk into our office, we have a dream wall, and it's just pictures of dreams that we've helped clients, help come to fruition. But if we all get so excited, and everybody can relate to this, the vacation idea where you get so much done, you're excited, you're, 3-week Italy vacation with your friends, the 3 months leading up to it is like all sorts of fun. But if you did the same thing with your big long-term dreams, and you treated those just like vacations when they may be different, but treated them like that and had pictures and planned for them and put things together. And then you looked at that all the time. It's amazing what will actually happen. And I'm going to just throw in a quick quote, which kind of ties this all together, because ultimately it's each of our own responsibilities to make this stuff happen. And this just seemed appropriate when we started talking on this. It says, I want to remember that no one is going to make my dreams come true for me. It is my job to get up every day and work towards the things that are deepest in my heart, and to enjoy every step of the journey rather than wishing I was already where I want to be. So enjoy the journey, because sometimes the journey is as fun or more fun than the actual outcome.
Wow, that's powerful. That second part of that quote is beautiful. I mean, the whole thing is, but that I think that's the most powerful part of that is
I would agree.
We all forget that, right? We forget that the journey is part of the adventure altogether.
Yeah. And that's really why we created the Dream Architect, because you need to turn your dreams into a plan. And that's kind of exactly what the Dream Architect actually helps you do.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Any closing thoughts for today's podcast?
I think that just to give somebody or give listeners something to tangibly act on out of this is choose one thing that you have really wanted to do, that some element of fear is holding you back from, and just take one step forward to get a little closer to it. So if it's some destination you've wanted to go, just call the travel agent and have a conversation. Doesn't mean you're locked in. Maybe you're looking at a second home somewhere. Call a realtor and just see what's available. Maybe it's a foundation. Call an attorney and see what it takes to put together all the legalities. Like whatever it is, just take one small action towards something that you've been hesitant on. It's amazing at what momentum that can create.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for your time again. This is fantastic. I'm looking forward to the next podcast.
Well, great being here today.
All right. And our last thank you, of course, goes to you, the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Dream Architect Live podcast with Brian Sweet and Brittany Anderson. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Brian and Brittany come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And this makes it really easy to share these podcasts with your friends and family. I'd also humbly ask that you rate this podcast and leave a comment. And this really helps other people find the show. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Sweet Financial Partners, this is Eric Johnson reminding you that possibility comes to those who create it. We'll see you next time.